When the noise of the world finally quiets, when you are left alone with the stillness of your own breath, a question can surface from the deep waters of your being, uncomfortable yet pure. Why do some souls walk a path without companions? This is not merely a pattern of the world, but a profound whisper from the spirit. It speaks not of an empty space beside you, but of the vast, undiscovered landscape within you. An ancient wisdom, passed down through my lineage, teaches a simple truth. The world you perceive outside is but a mirror reflecting the vast, hidden landscape of your inner world. An absence of outward connection, therefore, is never a matter of chance. It is a sign, a symbol. It is the language of a deeper current, one that moves beneath the surface of what we understand. Some souls retreat because old wounds have carved invisible canyons in their heart. Others hold a respectful distance because the world's clamor feels like a storm against their inner quiet. And still others are on a silent pilgrimage, seeking a path of greater truth, a life closer to the source, even if it means walking apart from the great procession. When a soul stands alone, it is not just a social circumstance, it is a window into that soul. Through this window, we can see the shadows of old pains, unspoken longings, and deep-seated fears. But we also see a hidden strength, a seed of resilience that, over time, can blossom into a rare and beautiful gift. In the tradition I follow, solitude is never an accident. It is the voice of your own deep nature, urging you to look within, to meet the parts of yourself you have sent into exile or forgotten. Perhaps, just perhaps, the quiet of the outer world is an invitation to finally build the most sacred connection of all, the one with your own true self. The path of solitude does not mean a soul is unworthy of companionship or lacks the warmth of a human heart. The roots of this stillness often reach deep into the soil of our earliest days. In my tradition, we understand that the first seeds are planted in the garden of childhood. Imagine a young sprout that is not seen by the sun or nourished by the rain. It learns to believe its own life force is not worthy of blooming. This becomes the person who walks in silence, who withdraws behind an invisible wall built to protect a tender heart. The memory of being cast out can also be a powerful sculptor of our path. A soul that has known the sting of exclusion, the cold wind of ridicule, or the ache of abandonment often learns a reflex to seek the sanctuary of solitude, fearing that the uncertainty of human closeness will only bring more pain. It is as if the spirit, to shield itself from new storms, prefers the shelter of its own cave. And sometimes, the reason is a difference in the vibration of one's being. There are souls whose inner rivers run so deep that they find no resonance in the shallow streams of worldly chatter. They seek a connection that is genuine, a rare jewel in a world often filled with polished stones. Therefore, walking without companions is not a deficit. It is an expression of an inner process, of old wounds asking to be healed, of quiet fears asking to be met with courage, and also of a unique sensitivity to the world. A wise teacher once said, "Solitude is not born from having no one around you, but from being unable to share the song that sings within you." So, when we see a soul walking alone, I invite you to look beyond the surface. Behind the apparent emptiness often lies a rich inner world, a mirror of invisible battles fought in the great silence. And often, what appears as a lack is in truth a profound call from the soul, a summons to a more authentic and awakened life. This absence of companions is not just a fact of the world, but a symbol, a key, rooted deeply in the soil of our spirit. Solitude is more than a fleeting state. It is an ancient archetype, a timeless guide that accompanies a soul on its journey toward knowing itself. In the great spiritual stories and myths of old, we find the figure of the hermit, the one who withdraws from the world to journey into the depths of their own being. This archetype breathes in our stories, in our legends, even in the ancient cards where the old man holding a lantern symbolizes the search for the inner light. It is no coincidence that many who walk this path without companions experience a similar current, even if they do not name it. A force from within guides them onto the path of introspection, the very path their soul has been yearning for. Solitude, when it arrives uninvited, can feel like a heavy cloak, an empty chamber echoing with unanswered questions. Yet, when we recognize its symbolic nature, it reveals itself as a necessary season in the great cycle of becoming whole. The soul that is not constantly pulled outward by the noise of others comes face to face with its own shadow, its fears, its wounds, but also its untapped power. The great river of consciousness speaks in symbols, and solitude is one of its most potent messages. It is a call to retreat, to embrace the silence, to encounter the truth that cannot be heard in the marketplace of the world. Just as the hero in the old myths must cross the desert, enter the cave, or walk through the dark night before they can find their treasure, so too does the modern soul experience solitude as a form of initiation. What the world sees as a social failing, the soul may understand on a deeper level as a rite of passage. The spirit itself creates the conditions where one is guided to look inward, even if the conscious mind at first resists or does not understand. It is as if the soul whispers, "Now is the time to listen to your own heart, before you can truly hear the hearts of others." When a person came to me in my practice and said, "Teacher, I have no companions. I feel this great emptiness," I did not see only the absence. I saw the seed of a profound transformation. I saw the possibility that this soul, in the midst of this apparent withdrawal, could discover parts of themselves they would never have known in the constant company of others. When held with awareness, solitude opens the door to authenticity, to inner freedom. What society may label as weakness, the soul recognizes as a step toward true strength. When a person learns to integrate their shadow and make peace with their own being, the relationships that follow will no longer be built on shifting sands, but on the solid ground of their own true, inner strength. At first, the path is often paved with pain. In a world that often measures a person's worth by the number of their connections, the absence of companions can feel like a personal failure. But from a perspective of deeper wisdom, it is not a mistake, but a calling. The soul expresses its sacred need for transformation in this way. It does not speak in words, but in the symbols of our lives, in the circumstances and seasons that invite our conscious mind to pause. Just as our dreams send us coded messages to restore our inner balance, so too is our outer life a mirror of what we need to understand. The absence of companions can be such a message, a sign from the spirit that it is time to let the masks fall and meet your true self. In my years of observation, I have seen that many who suffered in their solitude were not incapable of connection. Their inner being was simply moving through a much larger process. It was as if their own deep wisdom was protecting them from superficial bonds in order to send them on a more sacred quest. This solitude was not a punishment, but a kind of spiritual incubation, a chrysalis. The absence of friends can be a sign that life is asking for more authenticity from a person, something they have so far held back out of fear or a desire to conform. When the masks no longer fit, the forced connections fall away, and only the stillness remains. Yet within this stillness lies the seed of all that is real. This process is the heart of the path of becoming whole. The soul who has no companions or feels apart from the tribe often walks through a season where their deep self demands that they become who they truly are, instead of a reflection of what others expect. It is an invitation to shed an old skin like a serpent and be reborn with an identity that resonates with one's inner truth. In many great myths, we see that the heroes must first enter exile. Moses spent years in the desert. The Buddha sat in solitude beneath the Bodhi tree before his great awakening. And even the Christ spent 40 days in the wilderness before he began his work. These stories show us that isolation is not a sign of defeat, but the quiet before a revelation. The soul separates us from the superficial to lead us to the essential. The absence of companions can thus be a sign that an inner truth is waiting to be discovered, a truth that requires silence, reflection, and the courage to be with oneself. The path is not about renouncing human connection forever, but about ensuring that the relationships that arise later are genuine, carried by authenticity and not by the hunger to belong. For solitude teaches us a truth that many turn away from sometimes. We must lose ourselves in the quiet darkness to find the light that can only be born from the deepest part of our soul. The solitude that comes from an absence of companions confronts us not only with the silence of the outer world, but with an inner mirror. And in this mirror, something even more unsettling may appear: our shadow. I have often thought that the shadow is made of all the parts of ourselves we have pushed away, rejected, or denied because they did not fit the image we wished to show the world. But everything we reject does not simply vanish. It retreats into the deep, unseen country of our being, waiting for a moment to be seen again. When a soul walks through a season without companions, without the distractions of social life, the spirit creates the perfect conditions for the shadow to become visible. In the great quiet, suppressed currents begin to rise: the river of sadness, the fire of anger, the fog of envy, the tremor of fear, old resentments, and even desires one never dared to acknowledge. The constant noise of the world usually drowns out these inner voices. But when the world falls silent, they speak with a force that can no longer be ignored. Many fear this moment, for it is a difficult thing to stand before one's own shadow. The conscious self, which identifies with all that is bright and acceptable, resists the truth that vulnerability, aggression, or loneliness are also part of its nature. Yet here lies one of the great paradoxes of the spiritual path. Only when we turn to face the shadow, when we enter into a dialogue with it, does true transformation begin. Having no companions can therefore be a landscape created by destiny to help us cease avoiding this sacred meeting. Isolation removes our escape routes, it peels away our social masks, and it invites us to see ourselves without adornment. The pain, then, becomes the teacher. Every suppressed feeling that surfaces is a lost part of our own soul, asking to be heard, asking to be brought home. I have often observed in those I guide that the darkest moment of their journey, the one where they felt the crushing weight of having no one, was also the threshold of an awakening. Behind every painful emotion was a hidden symbol. Anger revealed a deep need for justice. Sadness was a call for self-love. Envy pointed to a dormant potential. And fear marked the very ground where inner growth could happen. Solitude strips a person down to their essence and confronts them with their truth. They can no longer blame the world or escape into company. They must acknowledge that what torments them also lives within them. And in this painful recognition, in the courage to face the shadow, the work of integration begins. Like the mythical hero who must descend into the underworld and face the dragon before finding the treasure, the absence of friends leads us on a symbolic descent into the caves of our inner world. This dragon is nothing other than our own shadow, our fears, our guilt, our insecurities. What at first feels like a punishment is, in reality, the necessary condition for wholeness. For ultimately, the shadow is not an enemy, but an unrecognized energy. When we welcome it, this energy transforms into creativity, into wisdom, into freedom. Thus, solitude ceases to be a void and becomes a sacred crucible in which the old is dissolved and the new is born. The absence of friends is then not a cruel fate, but a sign that it is time to make peace with all that you are. The life that removes outer company is guiding you to the only company you can never lose: your own whole self, with both its light and its shadow. The soul that crosses the desert of solitude and confronts its shadow feels a quiet transformation stirring within. This season, however painful, acts like a sacred alchemy. What seemed like loss reveals itself as an initiation. The first great change happens within. The one who has endured stillness without running away learns to listen to their own heart. They become an observer of their own thoughts, feelings, and wounds. They discover that they can bear their own company, and that within them lies a wellspring of creativity, intuition, and wisdom that was previously drowned out by the noise of the world. This path is like the myth of the phoenix. After burning in the fire of solitude and the struggle with the shadow, the person rises again from their own ashes. not to be the same as before, but to return with a deeper awareness, an identity less dependent on the world's applause. And it is precisely from this rebirth that the capacity for truly authentic relationships emerges. The reason is simple. Before, many bonds were formed from unconscious needs, from inner emptiness, unhealed wounds, or the fear of being alone. Friendships were used to fill the gaps, to avoid the shadow, or to escape from oneself. After such a season of deep introspection, however, the motivation changes entirely. Relationships no longer arise from fear or lack, but from a place of inner fullness and freedom. In my work, I have often seen that after a period of isolation, people draw entirely different kinds of connections into their lives. They no longer seek the crowd that distracts, but the encounter that nourishes. They are no longer content with the surface, but yearn for bonds that allow for growth, that honor truth, and that accompany the path toward wholeness. In other words, the pain of having no friends prepares the soul to find the right ones. What is fascinating is that this process changes not only how we relate to others, but our relationship with the world itself. The one who has learned to be alone no longer fears the silence, the rejection, or the departure of others. They know they can carry themselves, and from this inner certainty, they can open their heart with fewer masks and more authenticity. It is as if such a soul develops an invisible resonance. They no longer attract from a place of need, but from the truth of their own being, and this authenticity calls out to other souls who have also walked the path of self-knowing. Thus, after a season of solitude, deep friendships, meaningful partnerships, or even profound love can arise, marked by an honesty and maturity that were impossible before. Symbolically, solitude acts as a gateway. First, it requires a descent into the shadow world. Then, it allows us to re-emerge with a new, clearer, and more conscious light. This light becomes the inner compass by which a person also chooses their companions. What at first feels like punishment turns out to be a path of learning. The absence of friends transforms into an initiation that cleanses the soil of the heart and prepares it for a new planting. And although this journey is neither quick nor painless, it is one often the deepest paths to inner freedom and to relationships that are lasting and true. If one observes the flow of human experience from the perspective of the deep self, one sees that nothing happens without meaning, even if it appears so on the surface. Even that which brings pain, like solitude or seasons without companions, carries within it a hidden purpose, a lesson the soul needs on its journey to wholeness. The conscious mind, however, often misunderstands this sacred stillness. The mind, accustomed to company and approval, sees it as a failure, a void that must be filled immediately. But in truth, something far deeper is unfolding, a call from the soul for an inner turning. The Spirit sometimes guides us away from the outer noise, so that we may finally hear the voices within. In my own journey, and in the stories of those I have guided, I have seen that solitude acts like a secret laboratory of the spirit. There, free from distraction, the essential questions arise. Who am I truly? What is the purpose of my being here? What gives my life its true direction? Such questions cannot be answered in the marketplace or through the approval of others, only in the sacred intimacy of one's own soul. It is precisely in these seasons that a new relationship with the Spirit begins to awaken. A person discovers they are not truly alone, but are held by something greater, the vast ocean of consciousness, the universal archetypes, the ancient wisdom that reveals itself through symbols, dreams, and moments of pure knowing. It is as if when an outer door closes, another one opens inward into the timeless. The soul needs silence to awaken. Without silence, there is no deep listening. Without listening, there is no revelation. What seems like emptiness is, in truth, a sacred space where the divine is preparing to enter. That is why solitude has been a vital practice in all spiritual traditions. The prophets, the sages, and the mystics all passed through long seasons in the desert, retreats into the mountains, or periods of profound silence. They knew that only in the absence of noise can the deepest truth be heard. In this light, The absence of companions can be understood as an initiatory path, as a symbol that the soul is being called to look beyond the surface of life. The one who has learned to carry themselves in solitude, who has discovered their own inner wealth without outer company, is no longer dependent on the world to feel whole. They find their center in their connection to the timeless, to what we might call God, the self, or the great wholeness of being. And what is astonishing is this contact with the spiritual does not arrive as a theory or a dogma from the outside, but reveals itself in living experience, in a dream filled with archetypal light, in a chance encounter that illuminates the path, or in a felt sense of companionship, even in the darkest hour. One realizes there is something in me that does not die, that does not break, that remains unshakable through all of life's comings and goings. In this sense, solitude is the ultimate spiritual teacher. It strips away the non-essential, confronts us with our own vulnerability, and at the same time, connects us with a source of strength that flows from beyond the small self. The mind may suffer, but the soul recognizes it is a preparation for a life that is truer, more conscious, and more deeply rooted in the sacred that dwells within every human heart. I have learned in my life that what a person fears most is often exactly what their soul most needs. Solitude, as much as our conscious mind rejects it, is one of these sacred mysteries. Many flee from it, into distraction, into superficial attachments, into the noise of the world, so as not to hear the inner voice. But those who have no companions, or who are guided by destiny out of the social circle, stand at a great threshold, the threshold of their own transformation. Solitude is not a sentence, it is an initiation, the silent ritual the spirit prepares for those who must find the way back to their truest self. For only the one who dares to remain with themselves discovers the depth of their own soul. The journey of becoming whole, the central practice of my tradition, does not happen in the crowd, but in inner stillness. It is a path toward wholeness where we learn to reconcile the opposing energies of our spirit, the shadow and the light, the feminine and the masculine, the conscious and the deep unconscious. When life removes outer friendships, it gives you the chance to cultivate the most important friendship of all, the friendship with your own true self. And no bond is more vital than this, for from it grows the capacity to truly love and to live in relationship without dependence, without manipulation, and without fear. The one who has found themselves in solitude will no longer search in the world for another to complete them, but will share from their own inner fullness. Solitude shows us that true freedom is not the ability to do whatever we want, but the grace to be who we truly are, without masks and without roles. It liberates us from the tyranny of what will people think, from the fear of rejection, and from the compulsion to please. In this empty space, without the reflection of outer companionship, we discover that life can be full of meaning the moment we stop searching outside for what can only be found within. And this is the deepest truth. Solitude opens the door to the timeless. There, where the noise of the world fades into silence, the self begins to whisper, that inner core that connects us with the divine. We realize we were never truly alone. There was always something greater, a purpose that surpasses our understanding and guides us. Therefore, to have no companions does not mean you are condemned to a barren life, but that you are standing at the threshold of an awakening. It means that your life is inviting you to walk through the quiet night in order to discover the light within yourself. This light is your truth, your essence, your destiny. And so, solitude ceases to be a burden and becomes a privilege, the privilege of knowing yourself, of transforming, and of being reborn. The one who realizes this understands that what looked like an absence was, in reality, a deeper presence, the presence of their own soul.